and welcome. I'm Nozi Pumbanjwa and we're bringing you the highlights of ABSIP's 10th Financial Services Sector Conference that was held here in Johannesburg. The Association for Black Securities and Investment Professionals was founded in 1995. The aim was to address the lack of representation of black professionals in the industry. It quickly progressed into a forum where members could exchange information and ideas. After many years as a member, Trifosa Romano has been at the helm of the organization for the past 2 years. CNBC Africa's Arabile Gumede caught up with her at the conference.
What does ABSIP actually do and what does it aim to achieve?
ABSIP is an organization that is focusing on the nurturing and developing of young people in the financial services sector. Our vision is to be the custodian of black professional interest in the financial services sector and also the black businesses. So what we're trying to achieve is to make sure that we lead in the way on issues that has got to do with the financial services sector. Our motto is leading the way, and also just to make sure that black business who wants to be entrepreneurs and enter in the financial services sector, ABSIP can be a facilitator in terms of making sure that we have more of them coming into the fore, because of the financial services industry is not yet transformed to the level that we want it to be.
And talk to us then about challenges that you've sort of endured from the beginning right through to the stage.
The challenges have been in terms of putting the financial services sector code, whereby sometimes you have the members, because they work in traditional institutions, you find a person now sitting on the ABSIP. Sometimes you find yourself on the same table debating with your boss about the issues of transformation, what should be on the code and what shouldn't be on the code. Those has been the real challenges, but because ABSIP people have been nurtured to be mature and be able to separate the issues. When you're at work, it's a different issue. When you're at ABSIP, it's a different issue. So those are the things that we've experienced. And also sometimes now, because we have developed now, we're no longer just focusing on entrance. We're also focusing on building leaders who needs to be effective leaders. And we're not talking about effective leadership in South Africa, we're talking about effective leadership in the whole world, because we live in a global sort of village. So it becomes a challenge now, because certain members sometimes did not feel that they're still benefiting from ABSIP. But now we're starting to build that again to make sure that we develop a pipeline, but we don't develop it and leave it there. We nurture it and make it to make sure that it excels as a leader going forward.
Where to from here? Where does ABSIP go to?
Where we want to go into the continent. We want to have affiliates in the continent, whereby we can start now having dialogues and talking about how do we shape the financial services sector of the continent. Because for the continent to grow, we've seen many countries are growing, but the challenge is that there is no funding available in terms of accelerating that growth. The 8% growth that we are seeing in some countries could be 10 and 12% if the financial services sector was there. For example, you look at Rwanda, there is no, they've got only now established a coffee exchange. In Ethiopia, there is no stock exchange. It's only a commodities coffee stock exchange. So those are the things that we can start shaping the discussion as ABSIP. Tomorrow we'll end up having a Pan-African stock exchange, whereby it becomes an entry for anybody who wants to invest in Africa. It doesn't really matter whether it's in Sudan or it's in South Africa, but you still have one entry, and where there is a lot of governance and you can go in and out as you please.
Leadership and governance in Africa have at times been a concern for potential investors. Despite these concerns, Africa's resilience and growth dynamic have been positive. This amid a global economic crisis. South Africa's Finance Minister Pravin Gordhan says higher levels of foreign direct investment are necessary, but we need to ask questions regarding the quality of capital coming into the continent.
Africa's growth story, unlike in previous episodes, has not been solely dependent on resource prices and demand. Now, an expansion of small and medium enterprises is generating economic diversification. According to World Bank data, SMEs contribute some 20% of the continent's GDP and approximately 50% contribution to the creation of new jobs in sub-Saharan Africa. In turn, these firms are giving rise to internationally competitive companies which are able to compete in global markets, create new business models and new technologies. This could be the beginning of an important virtuous cycle. generating strong multiplier effects on the long-term productivity of capital and labor on the African continent. This has happened before in other economies, but now it is happening in countries such as Kenya, Mozambique, Ghana, and since our High Commissioner is here, Rwanda and elsewhere. The fact that African economies are breaking out of their resource dependence is not the only reason why Africa has shown such resilience in the face of the global economic crisis. Macroeconomic management has improved over the years. Compared to many developed countries, African economies have created remarkable macroeconomic stability over the past 10 to 15 years. There are many benefits to this. In the past few years, several African countries like Angola, Namibia, Zambia, Senegal, amongst many others, have issued external debt for the first time, which will enable them to invest in their future, but also develop capital markets. Coupled with the demographic advantages of increased urbanization, a youthful population, increasing connectivity, and a growing middle class, the conditions exist for a sustained growth trajectory if we manage the situation correctly.
Leadership is an item at the top of the ABSIP agenda.
I believe that the leadership that we see today has got the right vision. They know what needs to be done. However, it's in the application, in the implementation, and there are a number of issues that make that problem. One of them is around skills. Another one, institutional structures that need serious strengthening in order to deepen democracy, whether they are institutions of political ones or economic ones. Issues around governance that need to be addressed. So we do, however, have a number of challenges, but I believe that, to use the financial lingo, the trend is more positive than on the negative.
It's a time of opportunities, many, and challenges, of course. We can reap fruits from the opportunities if we understand better our challenges and if we demonstrate determination and put in place systems to properly handle the kind of challenges that we are facing so as to remain well focused to the vision of rising better, faster, and in a sustainable way.
I think if one is reflective, one would say leadership is under pressure. And by pressure, I mean, there is this huge expectation that needs to be lived up to. And we've done very well. The African Rising narrative has been a great one, but the truth is we have 10 million new young people entering the labor force every year. The nature of the strong growth we've seen in recent years hasn't always translated to enough employment. So if you look at the youth bulge, if you look at the demographics, what is expected in the next 10 to 20 years, the huge numbers of people we're going to be seeing in the continent, I think leadership is under pressure to start living up to expectations and then to start dealing with these huge developments.
But how do we take that message then to the youth? And actually, because you've just said, so many people that are sort of coming up into the working sector, how do we actually take this message of continued leadership and sustained ethical leadership, if you want to call it that even, to the youth and make sure that this sort of continues and is sustained?
Well, I'm a finance person, so I tend to see the solution as linked to investment. I think if you look at the investment levels in the continent today, they're much higher than they've ever been. This is part of the African Rising narrative. But the actual average investment levels are around 22% of GDP. If you go to Latin America, it's about 32% of GDP. You go to developing Asia, it's in the 40s. So my view is, yes, we've done very well. I think there's been some windfalls as well, but there is a huge pent-up demand that needs to be dealt with in terms of backlogs of infrastructure, of housing.
Is the current leadership going to be able to attract investment? You see, That is a misnomer, I think, because I think we should look to ourselves, to invest in ourselves. We must understand capital flows from Africa, capital flows to Africa, but more importantly, capital flows from Africa, and how we can better mobilize our own savings to improve the continent and not look to other people.
Does that not move to exactly what Triforce actually said earlier in her speech and about perhaps a pan-African stock exchange type thing, where those inflows or communication barriers would potentially be broken down?
I think increasingly as Africans we have to look at that. We have to look at mobilizing our own savings, and they are huge. The savings of Africans are huge, but they leave the continent and are replaced by aid from other people. And our discussions are usually about how can we get them to invest here rather than how can we invest here. Rwanda is a great example of self-determination, of organization, because what the president introduced a couple of years ago, President Kagame, is that on Saturdays, people just come and clean the city. And that doesn't require foreign direct investment.
No,
so, and they do, I mean, it is volunteerism.
How does Rwanda move forward?
We are, like everybody, focusing on change, shifting from colonialism mindset toward self-determination. We have written visions, we have policies and strategies and institutions, but probably we put a lot of emphasis in walking the talk. Many countries or many companies have very bold vision, well written, and strategies and plans, but they easily tend to say we could not achieve our plans this year, we will do it next year. Tomorrow is another day. In Rwanda, we have self-disciplined ourselves that tomorrow is not the day to do things of today. So discipline, monitoring and evaluation, making the institutions that you put into place to work, and being open enough. Where you don't have the skills, don't try to do mistakes. Borrow from those who have got the skills. So ease immigration for the skills you need, respect the investors, but also tie them to performance. That's how we have been achieving steady growth of average 8% for the last more than 10 years. We are really seeing poverty reduction in a country that was extremely poor to the level that you cannot imagine.
When the minister talks about transformational leadership, essentially this issue has to start to manifest in terms of structural transformation of our economies. What do we mean by that? I think those who understand the debates around how an economy begins to move up the ladder of productivity so you can have higher standards of income for your people, you have to move out of the general commodity space. It's very good to have commodities, but you have to add value. And that's where you need transformational leadership. 2/3 of the African population is still involved in very basic agriculture. And I remember 2, 3, 4, 5 years ago, these annual reports that come out of the World Bank and elsewhere, they always highlight one or two issues. They'll say you have to get the prices right or you have to get the institutions right. The truth is, it's complex. Success is determined by a good 10 to 15 factors. If you look at the competitiveness reports on Africa, they'll always size up the continent on about 12 factors. And we get caught up on one or two, and we think we're doing well just because we've done one or two well. The thing is, you have to do a lot of things well to succeed, and to succeed sustainably.
How far do you think we've come in terms of social inclusion, though? Taking the needs of the society and really saying to them, well, I may be leading, but I need to ensure that, you won't serve everybody 100%. But how far do you think we've come in serving as at most as possible?
Each and every organization has to think of new ways of doing business. That includes other communities, that bring in the communities, and you find there are companies that are doing it very well. They are perfecting it. Like, for instance, should I mention? Maybe not. Okay, yes, there are some companies that are really mastering it very well, whereby they've identified that if you want products in your shop, how do you then use, small farmers in order to supply you collectively? So what that means is that you need to invest in the training of those people, invest in the education, and therefore create that inclusive growth that we want. So I believe that the next single important thing for us to do in the African continent is to actually see how business contribute to inclusive growth.
When we come back from the break, we look at the continent's potential as a new economic frontier. Stay with us. We're bringing you all the highlights from the 10th Financial Services Sector Conference hosted by the Association for Black Securities and Investment Professionals. A thought-provoking discussion took place looking at the importance of good governance and leadership on the African continent. Some of the world's oldest and most long-serving presidents are African. Zimbabwean President Robert Mugabe is 89 and in office since 1987. Ethiopian President Girma Georgis is 88 and in office for 12 years. José Eduardo dos Santos has been the president of Angola for 34 years. These examples raise questions around the future of leadership in Africa. Is the continent allowing its youth to rise to positions of power? Is the continent open to new ideas, new strategies, new thought leaders? Rwandan High Commissioner Vincent Karega gives us an idea of the transformation and modernization that is taking place on the ground.
If one comes to Rwanda, the first question they ask us, they say, but you guys, 20 years ago, you killed each other and so on. Now you are so proud of what you are doing. It's President Kagame. So what after President Kagame? First of all, when is he leaving? Those become the question. So for us, the question is not when is he leaving so that we look nice. If he should not leave and he's relevant, why can't he stay? I heard President Mugabe saying, sorry to quote him probably, that why are they asking him to go and they haven't asked the Queen of England to go? And she has been running for 52 years. But beyond that, our aim is not to have him forever. And him himself said one time that if after me things will collapse, then I haven't done a good job. And during his tenure, he reformed. And he continued to reform. The laws, the norms, the youth empowerment you are talking about. CEOs in Rwanda. In Rwanda, I'm in the category of those who actually must quit in the next 2 to 3 years, and I'm 50, because below me there is a booming generation of the guys and the girls we call .com. So those are the young people that when we took government in '94, were sent to America, to India, to South Africa to study. Their minimum education now is a master level. They speak French, English, some speak German, some others speak Chinese. They are very fast on computer. They type without looking, yet I need to put lanes, and I'm only conversant with Word and PowerPoint. They are in other things that we don't even understand. So from the director of the president office, I think she is a lady, number one, and she's not 35. And she's doing so well. So it's the kind of director of office that you can call at midnight. You are not shy of saying, Honorable Excellency, apologies. It's like, oh, what's up? What do you want? Are you on BBM, on your or not? Can you tell me quickly? Even if I'm the ambassador, I want to speak to the president and say, can you BBM me and I'll forward it to my boss? She's not expecting me to write 20 pages that will waste time to the president. What's the issue? And you'll get the feedback of your boss in the next 10 seconds.
And now we're going to be looking at Africa as a diamond in the rough. We know the continent has many pressing challenges: the lack of infrastructure, healthcare, skills, education. The list may be endless, but for some, these challenges have been turned into opportunity. Local and foreign investment continues to flow into Africa. Growth projections for the continent remain positive. Africa's economy is set to grow by 4.8% in 2013 and 5.3% in 2014. The global average is 4%. Now let's take a look at some of the discussions taking place at the conference.
You just cannot build an economy on a stop-start situation when it comes to energy. Then the next challenge is the population catch-up. We have populations. The one thing that we are quite sure of is this African population will be growing for the foreseeable future. And when you compare the cost of building this infrastructure and the level of population growth, you'll find that in fact infrastructure is continuously playing catch-up. So that is why if we continue to restrict it to that level of investment to within country by country, we'll probably not score as highly at all in our lifetime. So we'll need to learn to transport to a cross-border transportation of power, which we do right now. Few countries do it to a small extent. South Africa is a great feeder of the Southern African countries, but we need to do it a lot more to do a proper Cape to Cairo kind of exporting of energy.
I think for the first time now we're beginning to think about infrastructure across boundaries and to look at the continent as one. For example, the most exciting for us is the North-South corridor, which is the corridor between Durban and Dar es Salaam, both at sea and on land, which is road, rail, and at sea, and looking at projects across borders, which are required to facilitate trade, to facilitate the movement of goods and people between Dar es Salaam and South Africa. But there are other corridors as well, from east to west. There's a northern corridor, and for the first time we're beginning to think about these trans-frontier infrastructure projects. The big thing is going to be the funding. And the funding, the mobilization of funding from our own resources. Because I know this is Steve Biko month, you know, Steve Biko said, black men, you're on your own. So we as Africans are going to have to find a way of being independent, of being innovative, of organizing ourselves in such a way that we can do things.
Nigeria has the highest foreign direct investment to anywhere in Africa. Because of what? Because of our enabling investment environment. In Nigeria, a foreigner can establish any company and he can own it without having anybody, without having a Nigeria there. We don't worry about that. Come and establish. And then we also find out you can also repatriate your profit at any currency. So with all this investment, these are ways of attracting investors. Similarly, we have also found that we have also liberalized our the visa regime. Now, if you want to go to, as a South African investor, you want to go to Nigeria, come to my embassy, I will facilitate and ensure that I give you multiple visas of 3 years.
I happened to be in Lagos for the first time last week, so I can definitely agree that there's tremendous stuff to be done there. The sort of issues around improving the connectivity, just in terms of cellular as well as internet connectivity, is always a tricky thing, I think, for operators and investors, because they ultimately only invest as far as they think that a market demand will carry them. And it's important that on the demand side, it also grows. And one of the biggest things that we can do as entrepreneurs in particular is that, for example, specifically with internet data, the more applications and services that are provided to people that are actually useful that they can do, the greater the demand and use of internet data. and that will then translate into greater demand that operators and investors can then feel justified to invest further in. So there's a whole ecosystem that has to keep growing there, and I do understand there's 2 or 3 hubs in sort of Nigeria now, but there needs to be that whole ecosystem that not only pushes up the supply side, but pushes up the demand side. And mobile technology becomes more useful the more applications and services that you have. Then people will use it a lot more beyond the voice and SMSs that are generally used anyway. So I would encourage not just the one-sided investment in trying to get more infrastructure down, but in investments on government and business level on creating the other ecosystem and other services and products that will drive up demand to justify more growth in that market.
Rome wasn't built in a day, and Africa certainly won't be either. But some fundamental points were made at this year's Financial Services Sector Conference. South Africa's Minister of Finance, Pravin Gordhan, reiterated the fact that there is vast room for the expansion of financial services in Africa. And Rwandan High Commissioner Vincent Karega stated that if you do not love your country, you will not love your continent. Key thoughts for consideration for a continent that is striving towards prosperity. From me, Nozi Pombandra, and the team, thank you for joining us. It's goodbye.